Good evening, everyone. My name is John Tabes, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that McNally Robinson is located here in Treaty 1 territory. That's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, the bookstore itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are here tonight to celebrate the latest book from Elizabeth Comack. We've had the pleasure of launching many books for Elizabeth over the years. I'm sure Wayne and Elizabeth will make reference to that this evening, and it's always such a delight and really feels like our event season is well underway when we do have a new book from her to celebrate. Today, we are celebrating the launch of Realizing a Good Life, Men's Pathways Out of Drugs and Crime from Fernwood Publishing. I won't take up too much of your time right out of the gate. I just have a few very brief housekeeping notes, and then I'll turn things over to tonight's speakers. There will be a series of presentations here from the podium. At the close of the presentation, the only thing I will put in your head right now is that we'll ask you all to remain in your seat for one moment, because we will need to safely transport Elizabeth to a table immediately beside our cash desk where she'll be signing books. I'll be back at the end to let you know how you can go about getting a copy of your book signed, but you can look forward to that later on. We have also worked with Fernwood Publishing very extensively over the years, and it's always a delight to have them here behind a microphone. So tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing your host for this evening, which many of you will likely be familiar with. Wayne Anthony is a publisher at Fernwood. He is a founding member of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives here in Manitoba, that's the CCPAMB, and a board member since its inception in 1997. And I will pause just for one moment to let you know, if you have just arrived and are looking for a seat, there are a number of seats still over here, and there is an aisle right in the middle, so you won't have to push your way past people. Wayne has also worked with other Winnipeg political activist organizations, including the Socialist Education Center and the NICE. He also taught sociology at the University of Winnipeg for 18 years. He is co-author of 3 reports on the state of public services in Manitoba for CCAPMB, and is co-editor of 6 editions of Power and Resistance, Critical Thinking About Canadian Social Issues, co-editor of Citizens or Consumers, Social Policy in a Market Society, and Capitalism Rebooted, Work and Welfare in the New Economy, both with Dave Broad, and co-editor with Julie Gard of Bankruptcies and Bailouts, a title that does not end with a question mark. So please, I would like you all to join me in welcoming your host for the evening, Wayne Anthony.
Wow, I was going to say that much about me. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks to all of you. This is fabulous to see this many people. It's so great to be back in McNally Robinson doing a book launch. It's been before 2019, so it's been 4 or 5 years. And thanks to John for organizing this. Thanks to McNally Robinson. You know, they've been so supportive of us as a local publisher and local authors for so many years. I can't say enough about them. Thanks also to Sana Awani from Fernwood, who's our promotions manager, who worked with John to organize this launch. So when I was thinking about what I was going to have to say tonight, I realized that I'm mostly going to be saying thank you to people. But I guess that's part of the course, because doing a book project like this involves a lot of people. There's lots of people to thank. So I'll try to be brief, but still bear with me, and then you can listen to the people you really came here to listen to, not me. So first of all, I want to thank the Manitoba Research Alliance. They supported both the research and the production of this book, and in fact, we've been working with the Manitoba Research Alliance for probably 7 books over the years. So thanks very much to them for all the support that they've given us. On behalf of Fernwood, I want to say that we're really pleased and proud to be part of what we think is a really important book. And that's this Realizing a Good Life. Elizabeth's going to tell you much more about the book and how it came about. I think Lance is going to tell you a few things about this book, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about that. And there's lots that makes, I think, this book a significant book. But one of the things that I guess I learned through working on this book with Elizabeth was about care. This book in the end is about caring for and being cared for. And she sets it in a social context. And I think that's really important because while care is, I think, a essential human quality, it's not just a personal and emotional quality. It's deeply integrated into our social structure. And given our social structure is one of inequality, it would seem that our social structure is also one of not caring. So thanks to Elizabeth for writing this book, and thanks for her asking Fernwood to publish it. Because I think it's a significant book, but also thanks to her because of her loyalty to Fernwood. She's stuck to her political principles and published now 14 books with Fernwood Publishing. We really appreciate her, sticking with independent radical publisher because she could have gone and published her books with just about anybody after the first couple because they were so well received. Her books, I think, are one of the reasons why we actually have, I think, a good reputation as producing critical books for critical thinkers. Equally, thanks to the guys. And Elizabeth, through this book, she referred to them the guys all the time, so that's how I understand you. You're the guys. You're the guys who told your stories that really are this book. And your insights and your courage and your commitment and your openness and your vulnerability, I think, will touch anyone who reads this book. And so thank you very much from all of us. And then there's the brilliant Jackie Travers. Jackie's art is on the cover of this book. Another of her absolutely incredible pieces of art. She's done book covers for I don't know how many books now it is, Jackie, with Fernwood Publishing, and her art always not only captures the essence of a book, but also enhances it. And so simply, Jackie, you're just the best. Thanks very much. And finally, just a personal note, this is now the 12th book, right? 12th book that Elizabeth and I have worked on together. And as always, I don't know exactly what, it's an immense pleasure and an honor to work with Elizabeth on her books. She makes being a publisher and an editor really easy, actually. She gets things in on time, and her manuscripts are clean and well written. She pays attention to detail, which makes things for me pretty easy. And the many discussions we had in working on this book were always interesting and challenging. And I will say that I learned a lot in those conversations and working on this book. So thanks very much. 15 would be a nice round number, don't you think? So again, thanks everybody for coming out, and that's it for me. And help me welcome Elizabeth.
This is amazing. I love book launches. And it's just so amazing to see everyone who's here tonight and to all of you who are watching this online. Thanks very much for being here. I also want to thank John Taves. You're hiding behind that screen there, I think, John. And also Sanawani from Fernwood for helping to organize this launch. This is now actually the 7th, take note, John, it's the 7th book launch that I've had at McNally. And it's always such a pleasure to do that here. I think all of us can appreciate the role that McNally Robinson plays in enriching the Winnipeg community. And we're, I think, really lucky to have this book. So my aim tonight is to tell you a bit about Realizing a Good Life, how it came into being and what it's about. I'm also honored to have Mitch Bourbonniere here, who's going to say a few words. And then Lance McIntyre, who also participated in this project, is also going to speak. And then after that, I'm going to do some acknowledgements. Okay. So here it goes. Realizing a Good Life actually emerged out of another book that I wrote with Jim Silver and Laurie Dean and Larry Morissette called Indians Wear Red. That book focused on Indigenous street gangs and located the emergence of the gangs as a form of resistance to the colonial conditions that young Indigenous men encounter growing up in Winnipeg. Jim, Laurie, Larry, and I worked on that project for 3 years, interviewing men who were involved in the gangs, as well as elders and cultural facilitators, and several women who were connected with the gangs. After completing that project, Larry and I decided that we'd really only just started kind of scratching the surface on that, and we wanted to take it further. And we wanted to meet with men who were in trouble, men who were caught up in the gang life, who were dealing with addictions to drugs and alcohol, who were cycling in and out of jail. And this time we wanted to learn about the challenges and the successes that they were experiencing in their efforts to move forward in their lives. So in December of 2014, with the consent of the John Howard Society of Manitoba, and Aiden Enns is here tonight from John Howard, we reached out to men who were part of the residential bail support and supervision program. We explained our project at an initial meeting with each of the men, and then began meeting with them individually to learn about their lives. What had their childhoods been like? How did they come to be in conflict with the law? How were they managing in their efforts to move forward? The idea was to stay in contact with them over a period of time, to follow them as they endeavored to realize a good life. As the project progressed, several more men joined us. In total, 23 men, most of whom identify as Indigenous, participated. While we lost contact with many along the way, 5 of the men stayed with the project over its 5 years, including Lance and Mark, and I believe Sean is with us online tonight. Early on in the project, though, we had a major setback. Larry passed away in September 2016. His loss was felt by many, many people in the community. But the men who were still with the project agreed that we should continue on as a way to honor Larry, and so we did. I continued to meet with each of the men every 4 or 5 months to talk about how they were doing. And we held a final gathering in January 2020 as a way to bring the project to a close. I do believe that Larry was there with us on that journey and that he was helping to keep us on a good path. Now, I had recorded, I'm going to stop for a sec because there are some empty chairs. Marty, you need to sit down. There's also one right up here. There's more empty chairs around. I'd like you to be as comfortable as possible. There's others too. Yeah, feel free to come in. Sorry about that. Okay. So I had recorded all of our meetings, which created a heap of transcripts. There's 113 in total, which I tried to calculate. It came to over 3,000 pages of text, right? That left me with the challenge of producing a book that would do justice to what the men had told me. The key focus of the project was this idea of realizing a good life. So I start the book by questioning what that means. Now, in our capitalist society, we've been encouraged to think of a good life in terms of the American ideal of achieving material or monetary success. Using that lens, men like Bill Gates are often held up as the exemplar of people who've managed to realize a good life. The co-founder of Microsoft Corporation, Gates was reported to have a net worth of $124 billion in 2021. When I first was writing this, I made a mistake and I put 121 billion. Oh geez, I left off $3 billion. Like it was $124 billion. Okay, but when you look more closely, you realize that even men like Bill Gates do not realize a good life on their own. Gates' success in accumulating all of his riches relied on the knowledge he inherited from those who came before him. I mean, he clearly could not have started Microsoft without that. It also relied on the support of the society in which he lives. So while the American ideal holds out the promise that anyone can realize a good life if they just work hard enough, that ideal masks the larger social forces that are at play. Recognizing those social forces points to the ways in which the intersecting social inequalities of race, class, and gender set up barriers and challenges for people in their efforts to realize a good life. I spent time in the introductory chapter mapping out statistics on social inequality, statistics that document the poverty and homelessness, precarious work, and food insecurity that prevail in our society. In the process of doing that, I had an epiphany of sorts. As an academic who taught courses about social justice for many decades, I had long known about the statistics that describe those problems. But in working on realizing a good life, I came to see them in a different way. What they really tell us is that as a society, we don't really care about people. If we did, would we really have people sleeping and dying in bus shelters? Or would we have parents who have to go to food banks to feed their children? So I needed a different way of understanding a good life than what was promised by the American ideal. And I found it in Indigenous knowledge, which frames a good life in terms of working on achieving wholeness, balance, connection, growth, and healing. Central to this understanding are the relational aspects that can foster well-being in a person's life. Also central is the importance of care, which Wayne has already, Wayne kind of preempted me on a lot of what I was gonna say. Let's just say that, okay? But this importance of care, I think, is important. Being mindful of the universe around us, striving for wellness in a way that doesn't interfere with the wellness of others, being in harmony with other living things, and taking responsibility in the healing of family, community, and nation. In other words, living a good life means caring for and caring about others. It also means being cared for. That's essentially what the men in this project were striving for, but they were trying to do it in a particular social context. So while the men's stories are at the heart of this book, my job was to bring that social context into view, particularly the ways in which structures like colonialism, capitalism, and patriarchy set up barriers and challenges for the men in their efforts to realize a good life, as well as how state systems like the child welfare and criminal justice systems more often than not act as handcuffs rather than helping hands. Now, one theme running throughout the book involves being in the problem. And Mark gave me a definition of what that means. He said, when you're in the problem, you're drinking and drugging and just what it did to you. Because when you're in the problem, you're so hopeless you can't come out of it. So that's what being in the problem is. The time that you were so far gone, drinking and doing drugs, there's no way out. All of the men that Larry and I met with had experience with being in the problem and feeling that there was no way out. So I used that theme to organize the book. How they got into the problem, what being in the problem looks like, and how some of the men have made great strides to get out of the problem. In terms of how they came to be in the problem, each of the men's stories is specific, but taken together, the stories reveal some important patterns. For Indigenous men, colonialism very much defined the social conditions of their early life experiences, setting them on a pathway into the problem. Having parents who were dealing with the impacts of their residential school experience, being taken away from their families by the child welfare system, being made the target of racism and bullying at school, being traumatized by physical and sexual abuse. These experiences set the men on particular pathways in their youth. Turning to drugs and alcohol was a way to cope with the pain that was generated by the social conditions they found themselves in. But that coping strategy created its own problems, not the least of which was conflicts with the law. As well, several of the men joined up with street gangs in their youth. The gang became another pathway that led them into the problem. Similar to what we found when we did Indians Wear Red, joining the gang was part of normal life in growing up in Winnipeg's inner city. While the gang may have given them a sense of belonging they were missing in their lives, it also introduced them to the business of selling drugs and the violence that came with it. It also meant adopting a street masculinity that involved being a badass and ready to use violence. So that life came with a lot of trauma and repeated stints in jail. Once in the problem, many of the men became stuck. Drugging and drinking and transiting in and out of jail became a cycle that was difficult to break out of. So another chapter explores what being in the problem looks like. In that chapter, I talk about the criminal justice system as a net. It's a net that entraps rather than protects. Once you're caught in that net, it's really hard to get out of it. That's especially the case when administration of justice offenses just keep piling up. Your initial charge may have been dealt with, but you're still facing charges for breaching your release conditions, such as drinking alcohol or using drugs, or not showing up for an appointment with your probation officer. We need to be aware that over 70% of people who are being held in custody in Manitoba right now are there on remand. What that means is that they haven't been convicted of an offense and are awaiting their day in court. And most times they're there because of those administration of justice offenses. While some of the men were cycling in and out of jail for relatively minor offenses, others had done serious time in federal prisons. That was the case for David and Sean. Their stories are important because they reveal how hard it is to overcome the lasting imprint of time spent in prison, including long periods of time spent in solitary confinement. David was incarcerated in Stony Mountain when he was just 18 years old. It was there where he said he learned how to be a man, including how to gain respect for a willingness to resort to violence. Sean said that his time spent in prison robbed him of the life skills he needed that would enable him to move forward once he was released. Having a criminal history also means you're marked. So police surveillance is heightened, as happened to David shortly before we met. With all those struggles, the temptation to turn back to crime is strong. As Sean said at one point, the pathway out of crime is not a pathway straight out of crime. But both men were intent on doing all they could to stay out of jail and to realize a good life with their families. The third chapter draws in the men's stories to talk about what getting out of the problem involves. 4 of the men, Lance, Mark, Trevor, and Peter, were living in sobriety during the years we met. Each of the men could recall a particular turning point that led to their decision to quit drugs. But making the decision to live in sobriety was only a starting point in getting out of the problem. Resolving issues of Indigenous identity, struggling to find financial stability for their families, managing their mental health and the lasting impacts of childhood trauma, turning to Indigenous ceremony and community, manning up to care for their children. These were prominent themes in their stories. Overriding all of those themes, though, was the recognition that no one can do it alone. Rather, realizing a good life is an inherently social project, one that requires the care and support of a collectivity, be it family, community, or the state as representative of a larger community where everyone has responsibility for each other. The last chapter features the transcript of our final gathering, where Lance, Mark, Trevor, Peter, and Sean engaged in this amazing conversation about what realizing a good life means to them. They talked about a number of elements: maintaining equilibrium or balance with your environment, breaking down barriers and facing your traumas, finding your identity, nurturing family relationships and responsibilities, and being positive and grateful. The men also talked about the importance of being part of a caring community and the need for empathy and unconditional support when people reach out for help. They were well aware that realizing a good life is an ongoing project, and there will always be setbacks along the way. But practicing a mindfulness of those elements and ensuring that people who have access to the care and support they need will increase the likelihood that all of us can realize a good life. The men were motivated to participate in our project in the hopes that telling their story might help others who are walking a similar path. But I do believe that we can all benefit from hearing what they have to say. So that's the book. Thank you. So next, it's my pleasure to introduce Mitch Bourbonniere, who, hang on a second, Mitch. I was gonna say he likely needs no introduction because he's such a familiar presence in Winnipeg. But I'm gonna give him an introduction anyway. Right? Mitch is an educator and activist who devotes his incredible energies to a host of community endeavors. In addition to providing support services to numerous community-based organizations, his mentoring and caring work through OPK and action therapy programs have touched the lives of countless at-risk and marginalized youth. Now, Mitch was also a key supporter of our Realizing a Good Life project, and I'm really honored to have him here tonight.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Wayne, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Lance, Mark, Sean. I have my little auntie and my two little cousins here, and I'm pretty sure you think I'm having a book launch tonight. And I didn't correct them because I really wanted them to come. We'll talk. So, little human spirits come into the world to do their earth walk, wanting, needing, and expecting a good life. In that good life, they're surrounded, they're loved, they're protected, and they have their people all around them in a good way. We call that belonging, safety, protection, and love. And they also learn to be empowered. I'm a somebody, I count, I matter, I have a voice, I'm visible, I'm good at things. And they know who they are, where they've come from and where they're going. They know their identity. They know their history, their people, their language. And they have purpose. They have reason and they have meaningfulness and they have destiny. That is a good life. We've heard that the impacts of the colonial project waged war on families and communities. And some of our beautiful little spirits didn't come into a warm, safe world. They came into chaos, woundedness, confusion. And those little spirits had no choice but to blame themselves. It must be me. There must be something wrong with me that this is happening. Yet they still crave the belonging, the empowerment, the identity, and the purpose, like food for your spirit. And they don't feel they deserve it on the legitimate side of the world, because they've been shown and they've been told they don't deserve it. So they find each other on the other side and they create family. And in the beginning, there's belonging, there's power, there's identity, and there's purpose. But what we learned from these men is that it's not real. And once you realize that it's not real, then what? I came into this world wanting, needing, and expecting a good life. It was not shown to me. So I thought I'd go and try and create it. And that's been a lie. And now I'm tired and I'm hopeless. And that's a turning point. And there has to be people who care, because the men themselves, they care a lot. Even in the problem, they care a lot. They care about their children. They care about their loved ones. They care about their communities and their families. What they don't care about is themselves. And that is horrible. I work with men who turn around and help other men and give other men hope. These men give hope. These men needed hope. These men needed to be cared for. We need to believe in people until they can believe in themselves. And then they'll turn around and they'll pay it back in whatever way. This is a really important book. And it is not movie stars and pop stars that I look up to. It's men like this. And I'm pinching myself that I get to be even part of this. So thank you. Love you. Miigwech.
We're also fortunate to have some of the men here tonight who participated in this project. And one of them is Lance, who has agreed to say a few words about like, what was that like for you, right? I know what it was like for me to spend 5 years working on this. So he's just gonna say, has graciously offered to say, well, I actually asked him. I asked him if he'd say a few words and he agreed to it. Lance?
I'm so thankful that Elizabeth and Larry invited me along on this journey with this book. I mean, there's a lot I can tell you, but I'll leave that up to you to read in the book. Okay? So go get it. Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, 8 years sobriety for me now. Haven't been incarcerated. My life has changed profoundly ever since I had their support. You know, they asked me a lot of hard questions that I was scared to ask myself. And it put me on the right path. Thank you.
I want to sort of end off this part of the evening with some acknowledgements, because I have many people that I want to thank for helping me bring this book into being. And first and foremost are the guys, right? The men who participated in this project, especially Lance and Mark and Trevor and Sean and Peter, who stuck with me for 5 years. Like, that's pretty awesome, right? That's pretty awesome. But, we would meet every 4 or 5 months or so, and we would sit down and talk for like an hour or sometimes longer. How are things going? What are you doing? And I would read over the transcript from the previous. So I'd have, okay, so what happened with that? Like, and you talked about this and what's going on. And you stuck with it for 5 years. It's been an incredible privilege for me to get to know them all. I recognize that sometimes our meetings were really hard, and I recognize that they were sometimes triggering, given what we were talking about. But there was also a lot of laughter and humor, I think. You gave me a window into your life, and I can't thank you enough for your trust in me and for your willingness to share your stories. So thank you. The project was supported by a grant from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council to the Manitoba Research Alliance. I've been involved with the MRA for some 18 years now, which means I've had the opportunity to work with really talented and hardworking people who are committed to making transformative change and realizing social justice. Many of my MRA colleagues are here tonight, but I especially want to mention John Moxley. John was our principal investigator until his passing in July 2020. Working with John was such an honor, and his loss is still felt by many of us. See, I get emotional at book launches. Now, I also want to acknowledge Robert Henry and Jim Silver, who took the time from their own work to read the manuscript and provide me with really thoughtful and constructive feedback. Bobby Henry is a Métis scholar at the University of Saskatchewan, who's doing important work on violence, trauma, and identity, and the impact of colonial systems on Indigenous peoples. Jim Silver has been my friend and colleague for many decades now. I'm going to just cry my way through this, I think. And I've come to lean on him often to give me feedback on my writing. I have to note, though, he's sitting right over there. I have to note that Jim and I have a friendly competition going as to how many books we've produced. And I'd like to tell you, Jim, I'm currently ahead of you. But sad to say, that's all going to change at the end of May when he launches his next book here at McNally. So I'm going to bask in the glory for the next month, being ahead of Jim Silver for a while. Now, Kathy Jaworski, is Kathy here? There she is. Okay. Hi, Kathy. Kathy Jaworski transcribed the interview transcripts for the project. And as I said earlier, that was thousands of pages of text. I've worked with Kathy for many years now, and I've come to rely heavily on her transcription skills. She's also done hundreds, this was 113 interviews. She's done hundreds of others. Like, I can't even count the number of transcripts she's done. So I couldn't do that work. There's so many times that, when we're doing work like this, you can't do it without that support from other people. But what I also appreciate is that Kathy and I get to talk about our grandkids as we're passing emails back and forth. So it's not just all about the transcripts. We get to learn about how our grandkids are doing too. So thank you, Kathy. Much appreciated. Now, much like Wayne, I also have to acknowledge my good friend, Jackie Travers, who's sitting right back there. As Wayne noted, Jackie produced the artwork for Realizing a Good Life, and she's titled it All My Relations. And I just think it's absolutely awesome. Now, I've known Jackie for over 2 decades now, and this is the 5th time that she's done the artwork for a book cover for me. That means I've had the privilege of witnessing her creative process. And usually what would happen is, I remember for Indians Were Red, we met for coffee on Sherbrooke. For this one, we had to meet over Zoom because of that damn COVID. But we would meet and I would tell her what the book was about. And you could almost see the light going on in her head. And then she would head off and then come back a short while later with, well, how about this? And it would be awesome. Wayne and I were talking about this process of hers the other night, and I think Wayne put it really well. He said, Jackie hears words and sees pictures. And I think that's what happens. Incredible, incredible work. As well, I have to note that Jackie had the brilliant idea that I should have hoodies made featuring the artwork on them, which, there we go. That was such a great idea, Jackie. Thank you. Thanks are also due to the John Howard Society of Manitoba. They not only let us advertise the project to the men in the bail supervision program, but they also generously provided me with space in their office on Ellis where we could hold our fairly regular meetings. So much appreciated for that kind of support. And then there's Mitch, right? Mitch has also, and I don't know that you realize, Mitch, how much support you provide to people. Like, I don't know that if you really kind of log that on, but you certainly helped us with this project. He helped to organize and facilitate our final gathering, the Thunderbird House, in January of 2020. But more significant, he's been there when either the men or I needed his counsel, especially after Larry died. So I'm forever grateful. Thank you. And then there's the folks at Fernwood Publishing, who produce critical books for critical thinkers. Working with Fernwood over the years has been such a pleasure. They make the whole complicated process of bringing a book from its initial idea to print and then getting it to the readers seem easy. But I must also acknowledge that this book has been very much a family affair. My daughter, who is sitting there with the red hair, Jessica Anthony, was the copy editor on the manuscript. Jess has such a keen eye for putting sentences together in a way that makes them so much more accessible to the reader. And that really shows, I think, on the pages of Realizing a Good Life. So thank you, Jess, for that. It was great to work with you. More than you're really nervous because she's thinking, oh God, it's mom. Like, I gotta do a good job on this, but it was awesome working with you. My son, Arthur Anthony, who was sitting next to my daughter, Jessica Anthony, is a sound engineer and co-owner of Collector Studio here in Winnipeg. Arthur has been tasked with the production of the audiobook for Realizing a Good Life, including helping me to do the recording in his studio. And we were actually working on that just yesterday. And I gotta tell you about this, because it's really cool. Arth sat at the control panel in his studio while I was stationed in the sound booth that they used for the vocals, right? I sat in front of my laptop reading the script of the book in front of a honking big microphone with headphones on, right? It's the closest I've ever come to feeling like a rock star. Like, it was really cool. I know we got a long way to go, but it was really cool. It was really cool. I don't know how I've managed it, but I have been blessed with 2 amazing and talented kids. So thank you for being where you are. And then there's Wayne Anthony. Wayne and I have been partners for over 45 years now. And 45 years. I don't know where that went. I don't know how that happened. He's also been my development editor and publisher on all of the books I've done for Fernwood, including this one. Living with your publisher has its advantages. Okay, don't go there. Whenever I get stuck in my writing, he's always there to help me get unstuck. That usually involves him asking, so what's the question you're trying to answer? Which I mostly find really annoying because I know that he's hit on the source of my problem, right? That I haven't got the question sorted out, so I can't figure out what the answer is. There's no way that I could have done all that I do without you, Wayne. That you've been indispensable for helping me to realize a good life. So thank you. Finally, I want to pay tribute to my friend, Larry Morissette. Larry was the force behind this project. He left us way too soon, and I miss him. Larry did so much important work in the community, and he left a legacy that we should all cherish. So I'll end off by saying thanks again to all of you, both those of you who are here and those of you who are listening online. I think book launches are awesome, and so thanks very much for coming out tonight to help us celebrate the launch of this book. Thanks.
Thank you so very much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you to all who spoke tonight. I'm really grateful to be you all here for the event here tonight, and so grateful to all of you watching online. We did have one comment just come in via YouTube, which is from Sean, who was one of the participants in this book tonight. So I'm just going to very quickly pull that up so I can read that. And then we'll move along to the actual details regarding the signing. So Sean just wanted to send his regrets and say that he could not make it tonight. He had hoped to network and elaborate about his part of the work. Fatherhood does take precedence. My story is not yet finished. I'm far from realizing a good life. So thank you, Sean, for sending that through. We really appreciate that. I would also be remiss if I did not pass along gratitude to Jackie Travers from our poster designer as well. We have a long-standing statement that whenever a book features artwork from Jackie, designing a beautiful poster is already done for us. So he was very grateful to see this beautiful book, as he has been for all previous Fernwood books. And we were also in the position, we recently highlighted the work of Fernwood Publishing through a display through the Manitoba Book Publishers Association, the AMBP, the Association of Manitoba Book Publishers. And it was just one of those moments that really reinforces what incredible work they do and just the sheer breadth and importance of the books that they publish. So always nice to be reminded, if not entirely surprising to see. So we will move along to the signing portion of the evening. We will ask you to remain in your place for one moment while we transport Elizabeth to a table beside the cash desk. I really feel like I should have a dramatic litter or something to carry you on. And then I'll let you know when the signing is good to proceed. The only thing I have to say about that is we will have books available at the table. We have books available at our cash desk. You can get a book signed before you pay for it. Just please do pay for the book before you leave the store. We're so grateful to all who spoke here tonight, all who watched, all who participated. Thank you all for your attention. And please join me one more time in acknowledging Elizabeth Comack.